All right, so up next on our 318 or 300 and 400 series differential transaxle transmission video series, we're going to spend probably two parts talking about this transmission or hydraulic pump. Before I knock some of the stuff off over here to the right of the screen. So what this is one of the early style Sundstrand 15U hydraulic pumps. Basically, to kind of go over the general parts, you have an input shaft here. This is this input shaft is, and I can't get it to turn. This input shaft is one of the reasons that this machine was parted out. As if you look at it, that input shaft has a significant amount of wear on it from where the drive shaft wobbled. Also, you can see something else, the control shaft or the input swash plate shaft. Hopefully you can see that there's that play in the roll pin right there. That's not good. That'll lead to a lot of creeping, so on and so forth. And so input shaft, this right here, this assembly right here will do will generate all of the fluid force that's needed to control the machine. This valve body, and these are just terms that I've picked up over time. They may or may not be what's in a manual, but this valve body, this is what controls all the fluid. So the high pressure fluid, the filter, is this steel valve body. And then you have an aluminum housing in the back, and this is where the swash plates and the pistons, the axial pistons are, that are controlled by that control arm right here. So what we're going to do in this video is I'm going to roll this thing over, and we're going to discuss a couple things that you will see when you buy these machines used, and then we're going to take this pump off right here, and we'll explore how it works. So a couple issues you're going to see with these machines. Probably the biggest issue that you will see that people will comment a lot about are the check valves right here. Now, because this came out of a 420, there are no nipples on top of these check valves to depress to release the fluid. They are just check valves. These valves are basically there to prevent the fluid from going back the wrong way, and some other functions that we'll get into in probably the next part of the video. This right here is a pressure relief valve, just for future reference, and we'll get into that as well. Now, these two check valves right here, they will leak, particularly out of the top of the nipples, if the nipples were on there, to release the pressure on the system, to freewheel them. But in this particular case, you don't need them. So these don't leak very often in a 400, 430 because it would come out the seals and everything else. What does leak, very common on anything that has this pump, as it gets older, is this seal right here will start to leak. It is easy enough to replace. I did a video many years ago on replacing this seal, so it is relatively easy to repair. Also, this O-ring right here that I'm about to pull out, or at least, oh crap, well, I had it set to where I could pull it out. But this O-ring right here over time will deform and flatten out, and you can start to see some leaking around this O-ring right here. Like I said, not too terribly common, but it is a source of leakage. You will also see some leakage around this input shaft right here. The input shaft will start leaking. You'll have to replace the seal, which requires you to more or less, depending on how you want to do it, you might need to disassemble the pump, depending on how deep you want to go. This seal right here can leak. It's not nearly as common as the front seal. Mostly, I don't think there's as much vibration here as there is on the drive shaft end. I would surmise that a machine with a rear PTO or rear bagger has a greater tendency to leak at this seal after a while than other machines. So that's kind of some of the big areas that you'll see issues with these pumps. And so next, I think I want to go ahead and we're going to take off this main pump right here. So this is the input shaft. going to see if I can take these off on video. Okay. I'm just going to go ahead and use the impact because it's a little bit faster and I don't need to struggle as much. Now once I remove this seal will be bad, okay? So don't remove these just because. So held on by two, what are these? 5/8 heads. Now these pumps right here were used in many machines. And this configuration they were used in the 300 series. Starting with the 140s, as I mentioned in the previous video, all the way up through the F9 series for the front mount mowers. Granted, they were a little bit different in terms of this pump right here was set up different. So if you ever go to remove these from a machine, if you go to replace this seal, make sure you understand the directionality that this is put on. You can even take a marker and mark something to make sure that you know the direction, because this engine will spin a certain way. Now I've completely lost my train of thought. The air compressor came on, sorry about that. So this will, the engine will spin counterclockwise or clockwise, and this pump right here is set up to run in counterclockwise or clockwise. And the reason I say that is once we pull those cap screws off, we can pull this pump off. And what's really important is you know the order that which the parts were taken off. And I'll show you this here. We'll actually look in here. So you see there's an O-ring right there, and then there's this little circle part right here, and then you see kind of a little gear. I'll move this back a little bit. You see a gear in there. And so I'm going to try to do this with the camera in my hand, and I'm going to try to do it very carefully. So I'm going to pull the pump off, like so, and there's the pump. That's the pump housing. And you see that these grooves right here have a wide side and a narrow side. And what happens is this right here, I'm struggling trying to explain how this works. As this drive shaft turns, if you see how that star shape is going to basically push fluid, that is how this pump works. And you can actually see fluid coming out there, right? And that fluid is pushed to one side. And if you look, I'll pull this out. Now what's really important is to keep these in the order that they were in the direction they're in. So we're going to pull this out. I'm going to put this in here like so. And now see there's a key in here. It's actually a little dowel pin, and so I'm going to turn this over on the side before I pull this off. And you should be able to. Well, normally you can. So you see that there's space back here behind it. I don't know why I can't loosen this up. This is weird. Normally this comes right off. Naturally, because I'm trying to do it on video. And I'm probably doing a terrible job explaining this. There we go. Go ahead and take the O-ring off. Not that we could ever reuse it, but you will need one of those O-rings if you do any work on this. I don't know why this isn't coming off. I'm going to have to work on this for a minute and then I'll explain it. I'll circle it around in there, and we'll show you how it works. Well, this is very disappointing. So I was going to try to get this off right here, and I cannot seem to get it off. Now, what I think may have happened, and this is just looking at this pump overall, the wobble has been so pronounced for so long that this shaft right here, where the needle bearing is absolutely just toast. I think that's where the needle bearing sits. Should be, if you look in there. And the seal sits right here. I think this shaft wobbled up and down so much that the key is actually wallowed its way into the gear itself. At least that's my guess, because I cannot move it, and this should slide right off, and the little key that's in there, little pin, the cross pin in there, should fall right out. That's been my experience in the past. So there is clearly something wrong with this pump right here that's not normal. And I was trying to figure out where it might be, and I cannot. So, but it just goes to show you that yes, and I mean, you can see that the wear is uneven right here. I mean, it just goes to show you that this machine was pretty much in a lot worse shape than you expected it to be. So I may just have to force this gear off of there just to show you, and basically we'll just write off the whole thing in terms of ever hoping to use it again. So I'll work on a little bit more, and we'll see what we can get done. Well, this is quite the quandary. I tried to even pry it off, went ahead and I was going to sacrifice the surface right here, because I mean, obviously the pump is bad anyway, and I can't even pry it off. I was actually prying the whole thing, the whole shaft out. So, I mean, there's some serious problems with the shaft right here. This is not anywhere close to normal. But what I was going to show you, and you're just going to have to envision this right here going around and around in a circle in here. So, if you look, there is the wider part of the groove down there, and then there's that, and here we can take this back out since, well, I thought. Maybe not. Anyway, this is not going well. So fluid comes in here, and as this spins around like this, you can see that every so often it'll come out, and that end right there will come open. And the fluid will basically go through that hole right there. And if you look, there's actually an opening in the back of the case right there, and that is where the fluid goes back to the swash plate that will drive how the machine is going forward or reverse. So this fluid goes back here. There's some axial pistons in the back here, which we'll get into the next episode. And as that's going around, as it's being driven, the fluid is going to modulate and basically come through here. It's going to go in these axial pistons, and the fluid will change direction here, which change direction to this gear back here going into the transaxle. Hopefully this will make a little bit more sense in the next video. Sorry if I did a really poor job of explaining it. I wasn't expecting our gear here to be so problematic in getting off the shaft, but you know, the shaft was toast anyway. I just didn't expect it to be this bad. So that's it for part one. Next part, I've got to figure out how to get this off so I can take this whole assembly, this whole valve body or whatever you want to call it off, and then we can explore the axial pistons in the back.